Hello and welcome to the Arsenal Bite Size podcast. I'm your host Clayton at Clates AFC on Twitter. It's the international break, but it's the week of the North London derby. So I thought, what better to do than revisit the Arsenal archives? And we've got Finn here, who's been on before. Finn, how you doing?
All good. Thank you for having me again, mate. Looking forward to this one.
Yeah, it's the big one, isn't it? And being North London derby week, we've had our fair share of positive results against that lot, especially at home, but more so the last couple of years, we obviously went and won back to back in their house for the first time since I've got it here since 1988. It was the first time, and you were obviously there for both of them. Before we get into it, and we're obviously going to talk about last season's one, how many North London derbies do you reckon you've actually done and physically gone to?
So I've not missed one since the 11-12 season.
That's home and away.
So you're talking, what's that? Probably been to the last at least 20 in a row.
Jesus Christ. And where does last season's one rank out of all of them 20?
Highly. I'm not sure it's the best ever. I'll go on to that kind of a bit more later. But anytime you win their away, it's gonna rank very highly. I've not seen it very often, so
Yeah, and that's the thing. In terms of like away credits, I reckon I'm probably like 2 seasons away from being able to get to a Tottenham away one, and I can't imagine what it's like to physically be there. Like it's the game every season when the build up comes. Ironically, what day is it today? It's Tuesday, right? And like I don't quite feel in the headspace for it yet, but like when it gets to that Friday before the weekend, I do start to feel like a bit ill for it. I don't know. How do you usually feel in the build up to the North London derby?
feel horrible. It's the especially the away game. It's the worst week of the year for me, and then it really, as you say, it ramps up from Friday onwards. And I just feel physically sick at the thought of it. And people always say, "Oh yeah, you must be really excited. You've got a ticket, whatever. You're going down." And I'm thinking, I feel horrible. Like I don't. It's not something I exactly look forward to. I'm obviously very grateful that I can go to the games and stuff, but it's really the pressure and the nervousness does take over a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, to state the obvious, being the rivalry, but what do you think it is specifically that makes it that kind of anxiety driving and the feelings behind it? Because we've got other rivals, and I don't feel that same way when we're about to play them. But I agree, I always feel a bit ill when it gets to this one.
Yeah, I think it's been drilled into you. It's been drilled into you as the biggest game of the season, and it is. No matter what competitive rivalries we end up with on the pitch, Man City at the moment, we had Man United before, and yeah, they're big games. But when you're playing the lot from down the road, and to be honest, I think the fact is as well, we always feel like we should be beating them, which makes it even worse because you're nervous. Like, I don't know if they get as nervous as we do because there's an expectation on us to win the game.
That's a good point. I hadn't really thought of that, to be fair. I know James from Planet FPL, obviously, he's a massive Spurs fan, and he says same as you. Like, he never actually enjoys the game or the day. But I'm going to ask him that next time, like from their perspective. Yeah, I think we're probably almost always the favourite to go and actually win it. So I hadn't thought of it like that. Sorry, I missed what you said there.
Yeah, I think maybe some of them feel like they're favourites at certain times, and there's been times in the last sort of 10 years where we have been neck and neck, and there's been Tottenham teams that have been as good as the teams that we've had at that point. But I still feel like you add everything together, we always, maybe it's just bias for me, but we're always favourites, in my opinion, even away from home. So, yeah, I think that adds on to it. It's the pressure of let's really not lose this because we've got more to lose than them almost.
Yeah. Yeah, no, makes sense. And yeah, like I said, I've never actually done Tottenham away. I've done lots of the home ones, but I kind of want to take this firstly down the route of like what it's physically like when you kind of go. And I always go to a pub to watch the North London derby and stuff, and I always see, like, I won't name the pubs, but in the Finsbury Park area there's always Arsenal fans going to the game that are in that pub. And I've heard a lot of mixed stories about like kind of what's the word I'm looking for? When you're kind of guided down the high road, an escort and all of that. I've heard mixed stories about that. I've heard people that say it's fine. From your experience, can you take us on that journey? Do you have any kind of rituals that you go through for Tottenham away?
Always, it changes on a year by year basis. I mean, I can't necessarily say what it will be for definite. Finsbury Park's obviously convenient. I mean, for anyone that doesn't live in London, you can get the tube from Finsbury Park to either Seven Sisters in one stop or Tottenham Hale in two stops. So we are talking about a really short journey. And so Finsbury Park is often very popular for people that even go into the game. I mean, I think you find most people would be drinking at their pubs they drink in at Arsenal because it is so close. I think that's something you've got to bear in mind. It's not like almost every other away, even in London, you'd be drinking near the stadium that you're going to go to. But in this case, it's so close anyway that people do often drink where they drink at Arsenal. Finsbury Park's obviously popular. Mount Hyman isn't, and even it's not many stops up there, Victoria Line. And yeah, in terms of going up the high road and getting to the ground and stuff, one big change in the last couple of years is they've moved the away end to the other side of the stadium. So the away end used to be on the corner where you come up the high roads, you take a right, and you'd be in the away end. Whereas now it's the complete other end of the stadium, so it's like the opposite corner to where it was. So there's now more sort of entrances to where the away end is, and after the game, you now get just physically filtered one way, which never used to happen in the old ground. So yeah, I'd say since the ground, they went into this new ground. I know it's in the same place. It has changed quite a lot. Just the layout of how you get into there has changed. So I wouldn't say it's exactly the same as it used to be. But yeah, it used to be sort of just like one up the high road. Everyone had to go that way. You were filtered that way. And, there was Tottenham fans on both sides and you were sort of walking through the middle, and that was that.
How was that? Was that ever like, was it intimidating, or were they just like, yeah, they're Tottenham?
It's not intimidating. It's most of us just find it quite funny. Like, it's just kind of, you've got people jumping up and down either side of you, and there's a massive line of police between you, and it's kind of like, it's mainly just posturing. Like,
Yeah.
there's massive lines of police and vans and horses and everything you can, and things do kick off every season, but it's mainly posturing, and most of the people walking down the middle, going into the away, and just find it quite funny, if nothing else.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, hopefully that will be me in a couple of years. But yeah, going to last season's one. So obviously, in the context of the flipping title race last year, this was huge, wasn't it? I can't remember what our fixtures were either side of it, but I feel like it was in the middle of a big run. Go on. I feel like, have you got a memory on that?
I can't remember specifically, but yeah, it was really. It felt like the sort of the nadir of the title race almost was when the Tottenham game came around, and it was like, and there's two games I can remember really thinking, and it was Tottenham away and Man United away, and that felt like these are massive games for the context of the season, and they're massive games anyway. But when you added on that extra layer of how the season was going and the title race and all the rest of it, it just became massive. Like, probably two of the most pressurized Arsenal games I can remember ever going to.
Yeah, so I think I've got it in front of me, which is why I remembered it. So I did get my timeline slightly off, but it was more the month of April. So we started the Champions League quarterfinal, 9th of April, played Bayern Munich, obviously 2-2. We then lost to Villa at home on the 14th of April. Then the next week, we got knocked out of the Champions League Bayern away. We then went to Wolves, and we done really well and won there. We slapped Chelsea 5-0. So I think it was the end of April to wrap up was a bit of a mixed month. We obviously lost to Villa, got knocked out of the Champions League, but recovered well against Wolves and Chelsea. Then went to Tottenham, and that was obviously 1, 2, 3 games before the end of the season. So can you remember roughly just how you were feeling in the context of the title race at the time? or was it purely in isolation? It's a North London derby. Forget every other bit of context. Just win today.
I think it was impossible to view it at the time in isolation because the title race took up every single bit of your thinking around Arsenal at the time. So it was impossible to think of it in isolation. And I was trying to actually think of it in isolation to try and take a bit of the pressure off it in my own head. But I just found it impossible. Like everything related to the title race. And it was even like the thing of, I mean, you had Arsenal fans wanting Tottenham to win against Man City. Like that shows you how much everything was wrapped around the title race. And it was impossible to think of anything in a vacuum, even a North London derby. So yeah, the title race was forefront on my mind, even though it's a North London derby and you want to win on the day just to beat them lot. But yeah, title race was always forefront of my mind, and I think most people would agree with that.
Yeah. So what was it when we spoke about doing this, and you've obviously done around 20 North London derbies, you said. What was it around this one that made you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I think it was a special one in that case. Near the end of the season, banging the title race. I think the game was a roller coaster. And it's fresh in the memory as well. So yeah, I felt like it was a good one to discuss today.
Yeah, well, and yeah, you speak about the roller coaster, flipping now 3-0 up in half. What was it? I've just got it here.
Yeah,
38
yeah,
minutes we were 3-0
yeah.
up. What I mean, before we get into that, again, it's hard to remember specific feelings. Can you just remember on the day when you kind of got into the stadium? How were you feeling on the day? I guess like when the team news comes out. So the team back then was, I say back then, it was a few months ago, was Raya, White, Saliba, Gabriel, Tomiyasu, Partey, Odegaard, Rice, Trossard, Havertz, Saka. Can you remember, like, were you feeling confident going into it?
I would say so. I mean, there's a limit on how confident you can feel in a North London derby against Tottenham, but I would say I was at the upper limit of that. So I felt like we came here last season 1-2-0. Granted the home game that season wasn't ideal, but I was thinking, we're and as I sort of alluded to before, there's been times over the last 15 years where I felt like us and Tottenham were sort of like on a level ability wise, but I didn't feel like that last season. I felt like we are a lot better than these this season, and we've won so comfortably last season. The fact that you can always rely on our defence to be solid, I felt pretty confident. I would say as confident as you can be when you're away at Tottenham in a North London derby.
Well, and it was for good reason because, yeah, 3-0 up after 38 minutes. Dare I ask what the limbs were like for any of them? What was it the best for any particular one of the three?
I would say probably a Saka goal. I mean, you have to bear in mind that all three of these goals are down the other end of the ground, so it's always going to affect your sort of line of sight a little bit, and you get that little pause where you're not sure goals got in, and I think that's particularly pronounced from corner goals and stuff like that, where stuff's sort of like whipped into the back post. You can't really see as a melee of players. So yeah, I would say the Saka goal definitely was the one out of the three where you could see it hit the back of the net straight away, and you just get that movement straight away.
And
Yeah, unbelievable.
that one was obviously a few minutes after. I think it was Van der Ven, right? He had a goal disallowed. Being in the ground, you wouldn't have been privy to all of the VAR stuff going on. How was that for you? Because you spoke about a roller coaster. I bet that's what started it.
Oh yeah, I mean that's horrible, but that's kind of more of one of my main criticisms of VAR in general is that when you're in the ground, you just got no idea what's going on. You could for me, it's something that was invented to improve the TV spectacle more than anything. Because when you're in the ground, you've got no idea what's going on. There's a VAR check of some sort, but you don't know anything else, and that just really, really amps up the tension. And I don't know, maybe this is just me, but I'm always so negative whenever I see that. I always just assume straight away that it's going to be the negative for us when I see that VAR check in progress. So yeah, that always ramps up the tension.
Yeah, I'm the same. As soon as I see it go, I'm like, oh yeah, it's done. But it went in our favour for that one. And yeah, then Saka scored, and then Havertz got the third. And half time, I mean, can you try and paint a picture of what it's like going into the concourse? I don't know if you went into the concourse, if you stayed in your seat. And
Yeah. So I went into the concourse and it was bedlam. is the only word I can think of to describe what it's like. You know, people going absolutely crazy, jumping up and down, singing, banging on the walls, banging on the staircase. You know, everything. People just losing their mind. But if you ask people that were near me in the concourse at half time in that game, they will tell you I was very, very concerned about what I'd seen in the first half, and I was really worried about the rest of the game. And I was just basically stood there almost in silence, not jumping up and down. And people know if I'm excited about it, I'm going to be jumping up and down, hitting the walls, singing, everything. But I was really, and there was a few of us, I mean, not many, but there was a few of us who were just sort of stood there and like saying, we've not really controlled this game at all. And we're worried about what's going to happen in the second half. So
Well,
yeah,
and
it's kind of just, I'm just stood there almost in silence, contemplating the rest of the game while people were having the time of their life around me.
well, you were right because they obviously came back and they scored 2 goals, right? And it was definitely squeaky bum time. But we'll get onto that because the year before we obviously won. I don't know if you'd be able to tell me this. Before we won there 2 years ago, it'd been a few years, right? Can you remember the last time we'd won there before the 2-0?
Time we'd won there, uh, we won there in the League Cup in the 2015-16
Was that the
season.
Flamini one?
Brace, and then
In the league? I
yeah,
can't remember.
14 season roughly, I think, or
Wow.
12,
So
13, one of the two.
the reason I bring that up is obviously I want to get an idea on what it was like at halftime last year versus the year before. Because the year before we were also winning at halftime. It was 2-0 at halftime. And I wonder, was it different given that it was the first time we'd been, I guess, so comfortable there and looked like we were going to win? I can't remember how we played in the first half in both of the games, I'll be honest. But in terms of scorelines, it was 2-0, 3-0. Was it different last year to the year before?
Yeah, I would say for most people it wasn't. Like I would say when I looked around, I was seeing a similar sort of spectacle both years. But for me personally, I was so much happier the first year with a 2-0. So I just felt like we completely dominated the game. They had nothing to sort of affect us with, and I felt so happy with the performance. And I almost felt like we were almost definitely going to win this game. That I really, really was just absolutely buzzing. Whereas the last season, I just felt very uneasy. Like even though we were 3-0 up, I just felt like we hadn't controlled the game. They put us under a lot of pressure, and I just had an uneasy feeling in my stomach, and I wasn't exactly sure why, but it turned out to be actually accurate. So
Yeah, well, if you were feeling uneasy at half time, Romero scores in the 64th minute, Son gets a penalty in the 87th. How the hell do you even describe how you're feeling in that moment? Because again, I was watching it myself, but I can't imagine what it's a there's something so different about when you're physically in a game, and I think you feel everyone else's anxiety run through you, right? So how was that for you being in the
it was probably one of, if not the worst, like 10 minutes of my life, pretty much after the penalty went in, as I was just absolutely convinced they were getting a third goal, and they were putting the pressure on, piling the pressure on. I'd felt uneasy anyway. They'd scored 2 goals at half. I was convinced that they were going to score another. So it was, yeah, it's absolutely horrible. One of the worst, one of the worst patches of play I've ever sort of experienced emotionally in a football stadium watching Arsenal. So yeah.
and during that period, I quite often I still remember, 2 years ago when we were Liverpool away in that period where we dropped points against West Ham, Liverpool, Southampton. It's that Liverpool away game. I remember when we were 2-0 up, I literally started picturing one hand on the Premier League title. And then when it went away, like I had a very vivid image in my head. When Spurs got 2 goals back last year, was anything other than just being in the moment going through your head? Were you thinking about shit you might get from other fans? Were you thinking of the title, or what was going on in your head in that moment?
I'll be honest. So obviously, I've said before the game, I said it's impossible to separate it from the title race and the context and all that. But when it was really focused in on that last few minutes, I'll be honest, the only thing going through my head is just let us beat these today. We've been 3-0 up. I'm in the stadium, surrounded by them. Just get the 3 points and let's go, because nothing else mattered at that point. It was just get this 3 points now.
Yeah. And I have to ask, before they got the goals back even, what was the atmosphere like in the ground? Because I was watching it in a pub where I couldn't hear anything. So I imagine it must have been semi-toxic from their perspective. 3-0 down the year before they were beat 2-0 in their own backyard. What was that like?
I would say their home atmosphere was definitely more toxic in the 2-0. Because I think you've got to bear in mind, obviously, the context of the managers and stuff. And I think there was a certain feel-good factor around Tottenham, which had diminished by the time we played them last season, but it was still there comparatively to the season before. I don't feel like their home atmosphere was too toxic at 3-0 down last year, especially compared to when they were getting comfortably beaten the year before. And I think, as well, as much as I'm saying I was worried they were creating chances, putting pressure on, I feel like they sort of knew that they were playing not too badly in the game and that there was a chance of them coming back. So I'd say their home atmosphere wasn't too toxic that year. The year before was probably a lot worse, I would say.
Yeah. And then at full time, what the hell is that like? I remember, I think I spoke to you. I don't think it was on a pod. I think it was literally just in person
Yeah.
where you said the year before what it was like when all of the players Arteta came running towards you guys in the away end. What's that like at full time?
So, I mean, I was thinking last night, this was the only reason I would have wanted to speak about the game the year before more, was for this moment. Not last season, it was great when they ran over as well, and it kind of felt a bit more choreographed. Whereas the year before, when we'd won, and obviously it all kicked off down the other end, that Tottenham fan had come down and tried to kick Ramsdale, and Tierney had got involved in stuff, and Xhaka was running off and getting involved in stuff. And then the spontaneous running over of the players, I mean, that was just pure ecstasy. I mean, that's just like one of the best memories of my life almost. The pure dopamine rush was just amazing. And yeah,
Nothing compares.
similar last year as well, but I felt like it was a little bit more choreographed last year. Not to take the shine off as much, but yeah, 2 years ago when they came running over organically, it was just, I mean, that was one of the best moments I've ever had in a football stadium. Just the rush.
I think you're right about the organic versus choreograph because I'm sure I remember initially they weren't gonna go over and like not antagonize, but like not make a big thing out of it in their own stadium. But then obviously, like you say, everything happened with Ramsdale. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before. Richarlison was getting involved as well. So yeah, I
No,
think
but
there's an element of that.
yeah. And the season before as well. I mean, not to speak about that game too much because we're doing the other one, obviously, but I think it's relevant. That was the first time seeing us win there in, 7 or 8 years. It was just an absolute release of tension, release of excitement, release of just being overjoyed that we'd finally won there after so many years. And it was perfect. One of the best moments I've ever had in a football stadium. You can't
Ah,
describe that rush. I mean, that is a sort of rush which people ask you, why do you spend thousands of pounds a year, travel all over the country, all over Europe, you know, miss events, miss whatever. That's that sort of thing. That a last minute winner or something like that. Just money can't buy it. It's the greatest feeling in the world.
yeah, I can. Like I said, not done a North London derby, but being in the away end for other ones, it nothing comes close to it. So hopefully we have another one this Sunday. But in terms of just wrapping up on last year, when it's done, what do you do after? Do you go out celebrate anywhere, or you kind of head home and rewatch it all?
I mean, I sort of. I think a lot of us do this. As I was sort of alluding to earlier, we get shuttled into Northumberland Park. We don't get a choice. We have to go through there. So train to Tottenham Hale, change onto the Victoria Line, back over Islington, over Arsenal. Everyone sort of meets up that's been in the away end, and yeah, we just have it off the rest of the evening, especially when we've won. It's just everyone comes back over, and we just have a great time. Yeah, get back in the pub. Everyone's buzzing. Yeah, that's one of the best bits of the day, really. If we won, get back over there and just we have it off for the rest of the day. It's brilliant.
Nice. And just on that, the for people that are listening that maybe from abroad and stuff, it's so useful when you talk about the actual stations. Northumberland Park's obviously like a very well, it's the station for Tottenham's ground, right? On the overground. So when they funnel you into that, what's that like? Because I'm guessing straight after the game, it must be full of them. Like, or do they keep you inside for a while? Do you cross paths with a lot of them after the game, or?
We don't get kept inside. I mean, I've been to Tottenham away games before where we have been kept inside for a while. I mean, talking about that Flamini game in the League Cup, for example, I remember we got kept in for like best part of an hour that night. But it's going to depend on what the police think is the risk level of letting you out straight away. Normally, we get let out straight away. I think this Northumberland Park thing is to mitigate the risk from the police as much as possible. So come out the stadium where the away end is, turn left, turn right. There's police either side of you, and it's just the people in the away end getting funneled through. Once you start getting towards Northumberland Park Station, you start seeing a few opposition fans either side of the police barricades. And then once you get towards the actual entering of the station, you're on one side, they're on the other side, both ways try and get into the station, and there's hundreds of police in between you.
It sounds like the start of a war scene potentially.
Yeah, you do. I mean, you probably cross paths with more of them on the way in than the way out now because of that. But yeah, once you get on the train platforms and stuff, you do cross paths with them, and things do kick off, things do happen. It's a passionate derby, and emotions spill over sometimes. But yeah, no, you do.
Yeah.
You cross paths with a few, but yeah, it's a serious operation by the police, and they do as much as possible to keep you apart for as long as possible. And there's, especially in the last couple of years, there's been a real uptake in how many of them are out there, horses, vans. It's a professional operation from them. So yeah, you don't come across too many, and if you do, it's kind of sanitized by the sheer amount of police presence.
Yeah, fair play. And final one before we move on to this Sunday, just briefly. It was Arteta's 100th Premier League win. Were you aware of that going into it? I don't really remember it, to be honest.
Maybe I was at the time. I don't know. I can't think back now and say that I definitely was or wasn't, but it wouldn't surprise me if I did kind of know that at the time. But I don't know. Those aren't really things that I really think about that much anyway. So
Yeah,
for me, I wouldn't have been in the ground like, oh my god, it's Arteta's 100th.
no, it's just
whatever.
I was
might
literally
have
just
known,
reading the match
but
report now. I was like,
yeah,
oh shit, didn't realize that.
I might have known deep down, and I might have seen it on Twitter or Instagram or whatever, but I wouldn't have been. Not something I would have been considering at the time.
Yeah, fair play. And then so attention turns to this Sunday. We obviously seen the news. Odegaard went off injured on last night for Norway. So fingers crossed it's not serious, but we just have to wait and see. Do you think we can make it a hat trick? Hat trick of wins in their ground this Sunday? How are you feeling ahead of this one?
I think we can. I think we definitely can. I'm going to be honest. This is me on the Tuesday, just after hearing about the Odegaard injury and stuff. It's going to affect my excitement for the game a little bit, especially with Rice already out suspended for the absolute bollocks from the other week. I don't want to go into that too much, but I mean, if you consider Marino as part of our ideal midfield three, I mean, we've not seen him play for Arsenal yet, so it's hard to do so. But if you were to consider him part of our ideal midfield three, then our entire midfield three is out for Sunday. This is me assuming that Odegaard's going to be out. We've not heard definitively yet either way. But, it looks like he's got a sprained ankle, so I'm not sure you recover from that between Monday night and Sunday of the same week. I'm not a physio or doctor, so don't take my word for it, but that's just my assumption. That leaves me not quite as confident as I would normally be. But I think, we've still got our ideal defence. The defence that's going to play is going to be the midfield that's going to play, rather, is going to be quite defensively sound and defensively minded, which might not be a bad thing in a fixture like this. So yeah, I'm fairly confident. I think we're clearly a better side than them. So on paper, we should be winning the game. I mean, you can never be too confident at North London derby, especially away from home. And they've got weapons, they've got players that play well against us, but I would expect us to win. We probably won't keep a clean sheet, but I'd expect us to win.
Yeah, I was going to say clean sheets in this fixture are usually quite rare. I think that 2-0 a couple of years ago was a rarity. Yes. So yeah, it's a game that always has goals, isn't it? But yeah, fingers crossed it's not too bad. But I'm with you. I struggle to see Odegaard making it. But yeah, like you said, it's Tuesday, so Nima and I will be back on Friday previewing it. So if anyone's listening, tune into that, and we'll go through the usual predicted lineups. Hopefully, have some actual information from Arteta as well. But oh my god! Imagine if we could make it a hat trick. That would be insane. Have you got any plans to do anything different to what you usually do this Sunday when you head there?
All up in the air at the moment. I mean, I don't really know at the moment, but I can't imagine I would do anything too out of the ordinary. So we'll see what happens. But yeah.
Nice. Well, fingers crossed you have another great one. Is there anything you wanted to share before we get out of here from this one?
No, I think that's everything really. Yeah, just yeah, that's really it.
Nice one. Well, cheers for coming on. Just shout out a couple of the guys that joined in live before we get out of here. Nick Fadley was in, and Luke at AFC. Cheers for joining, guys. Hope that's whet the appetite ahead of Sunday. It's the North London derby. It's going to be a strange one. Like Finn said, we're obviously missing basically our on paper ideal midfield three, but like you said, defense is stacked and we're the better team. So let's see how we get on. Finn, thanks a lot for joining. Hopefully Sunday's another good one. Up the Arsenal. Cheers, everyone.